Your card was declined again, Mrs. Whitaker. Caroline Bennett stared at the woman behind the hospital billing desk as if the words belonged to someone else. Declined. The word felt impossible. She was married to Preston Whitaker, a millionaire hotel owner whose face appeared in business magazines and charity campaigns across the Pacific Northwest. People wrote articles about his generosity. Reporters called him a visionary entrepreneur. Yet somehow, on the night she needed him most, she was standing in a private Seattle hospital with an unpaid bill and nowhere to turn. The strangest part was not the declined card. It was what happened just before it. Less than 30 minutes earlier, Caroline had opened her banking application and discovered something that made no sense. Their joint account was nearly empty. Not low, not restricted. Empty. Almost 90% of the money had vanished in a series of transfers completed earlier that afternoon. Nobody had warned her. Nobody had explained it. And the only person who could authorize those transfers was her husband. A cold sensation settled into her chest. Upstairs, doctors were waiting to move her into a specialized monitoring suite after concerns about her pregnancy. Downstairs, the hospital required an $87,000 deposit before approving the transfer. Caroline rested a hand on her 8-month pregnant stomach and glanced toward the elevator. Her son deserved care. He deserved stability. Instead, his mother was standing beneath fluorescent lights, trying to understand why her life suddenly looked like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. "Would you like to try another payment method?" the billing coordinator asked gently. Caroline nodded. Her fingers trembled as she handed over a second card. The woman processed it, waited, then offered the same apologetic smile. Declined. Around her, people moved through the lobby carrying flowers, coffee cups, and overnight bags. Life continued normally for everyone else. Caroline felt trapped inside a different reality. She pulled out her phone and pressed Preston's contact again. Ring, ring, ring. Voicemail. 19 calls. 19 unanswered calls. She tried once more. This time he answered. Relief rushed through her. Preston. Music echoed through the speaker. Laughter. Glasses clinking. The sound of a celebration. "What?" he asked. Caroline closed her eyes. "The hospital needs the deposit tonight." Silence. Then a sigh. "I told you I am handling things. The doctors said they need authorization now. I am busy." Caroline glanced toward the billing desk. "Please." Another pause followed. "Stop making everything dramatic." Her grip tightened around the phone. "This is not drama." "Then it can wait until tomorrow." The line disconnected. Caroline lowered the phone slowly. Tomorrow. Champagne glasses surrounded them. City lights glittered behind them. The caption read, "Celebrating the deal that changes everything." Caroline stared at the image. While she sat in a hospital trying to secure medical care for their child, her husband was celebrating. The realization hurt, but not as much as the question that followed. What deal had changed everything? Because whatever it was, it seemed connected to the missing money. Her phone vibrated again. She expected another hospital alert. Instead, an unfamiliar number appeared. One message. 7 words. "Check your emergency contact file immediately." Caroline frowned. Before she could respond, a second message arrived. "The sender knows something your husband does not." Caroline stared at the anonymous message until the screen dimmed in her hand. "Check your emergency contact file immediately." The words felt oddly specific, as if whoever sent them knew exactly where she was standing and exactly what she had just discovered. Her first instinct was to delete the message. Her second was to ask herself why a stranger would know anything about her hospital records. Before she could decide, another notification appeared. This one came from the hospital patient portal. A routine update. At least that was what she expected. Instead, she found herself opening the emergency contact section she had not reviewed in years. Her breath caught immediately. Preston's name was listed first. That was normal. But beneath it sat another name she had not seen in nearly a decade. Nathaniel Brooks. Caroline blinked, then blinked again. The name remained. Somehow it had never been removed. 9 years had passed since she last spoke to him. 9 years since everything fell apart. 9 years since she convinced herself that chapter of her life was permanently closed. Yet there it was, quietly sitting inside a forgotten hospital file. Nathaniel Brooks. She quickly exited the screen. Her heart was beating too fast now. The timing felt impossible. Why would someone tell her to check that specific file tonight of all nights? A nurse approached carrying a clipboard. "Mrs. Whitaker?" Caroline looked up. Yes. The doctor wants to move you upstairs as soon as possible. We are still waiting on financial authorization. Caroline nodded weakly. I know. The nurse hesitated. Do you have any family members who can assist? The question should have been simple. Instead, it felt strangely complicated. Her parents lived across the country. Most of her old friends had drifted away over the years. Preston was supposed to be the person she could rely on. Yet tonight, he felt farther away than everyone else combined. The nurse offered a sympathetic smile before leaving. Caroline sat alone beside the lobby window overlooking downtown Seattle. Rain streaked across the glass. The city lights blurred into soft colors. For a moment, she remembered another rainy night years ago. A small apartment. Cheap takeout containers. Nathaniel sitting across from her with spreadsheets spread across the kitchen table. He had not been wealthy then. Not even close. He spent every spare dollar building a technology company nobody believed would succeed. Everyone called him unrealistic. Everyone except Caroline. Back then, they dreamed together. Then everything changed. His company collapsed. Investors disappeared. Phone calls stopped. And one day Nathaniel disappeared too. At least that was the version of the story she had believed. Her phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message. Do not call the sender. Do not reply. Just answer one question. Caroline frowned. A second message appeared immediately. Why was Nathaniel still listed after 9 years? She stared at the screen. Because she never removed him. The answer seemed obvious. Yet something about the question bothered her. Before she could think further, a hospital administrator approached the billing desk carrying paperwork. The coordinator glanced toward Caroline, then toward the computer, then back again. Mrs. Whitaker? Caroline stood. Yes. We may have another option. Hope flickered briefly inside her. What kind of option? The woman turned the monitor slightly. If we cannot reach your primary contact, hospital policy allows us to contact another approved emergency guarantor listed in your records. Caroline froze. Suddenly, the anonymous message made perfect sense. Her pulse quickened. You mean Nathaniel? The coordinator nodded. Mr. Nathaniel Brooks. Caroline felt the air leave her lungs. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline. She looked down at the name on the screen, then back toward the elevator leading to the maternity floor. Finally, she whispered the one question she never imagined asking again. If you call him, do you think he would answer? The billing coordinator hesitated for only a moment before answering. I do not know if he would answer, Mrs. Whitaker, but according to our records, he has never removed himself as an authorized emergency guarantor. Caroline felt her pulse quicken. The statement made even less sense than the anonymous messages. 9 years. 9 years without a phone call, a meeting, or a conversation. Yet somehow Nathaniel Brooks had remained attached to her emergency records the entire time. The coordinator gently turned the monitor toward her. There it was. His name. His number. His authorization status. Active. Caroline stared at the screen as rain continued tapping softly against the hospital windows. Can you give me a minute? She asked quietly. The woman nodded and stepped away. Caroline sat back down. Her hands rested protectively on her stomach. Everything felt surreal. Hours earlier, she believed her biggest problem was an unpaid hospital deposit. Then she discovered the missing money. Then the unanswered calls. Then the mysterious messages. Now the past was somehow sitting inside her hospital file waiting to be reopened. Her phone vibrated. Another message from the anonymous sender. Do not be afraid of the truth. She immediately looked around the lobby. Nobody appeared to be watching her. Families moved between elevators. Nurses crossed the corridor carrying charts. Security guards stood near the entrance. Everything looked normal. Yet someone clearly knew what was happening. Before she could think further, her phone rang unexpectedly. Not Preston. An unknown number from California. Caroline froze. The call continued ringing. Something inside her told her to answer. Hello. A calm female voice responded. Mrs. Whitaker? Yes. My name is Olivia. I am calling from Brooks Global Ventures. Caroline nearly dropped the phone. For several seconds, she could not speak. How did you get this number? The hospital contacted our office regarding an emergency notification. Caroline's heart pounded. You contacted Nathaniel? Not personally, Olivia replied. The request came through our executive operations system. Caroline closed her eyes. Nathaniel owned one of the fastest-growing technology investment companies in the country. She had seen his name in financial publications more than once. But hearing someone speak about him professionally somehow made everything feel more real. "Is he there?" she asked. Olivia hesitated briefly. "Mr. Brooks is currently in a private investment meeting." Caroline laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because the situation felt impossible. Of course he was in a meeting. Successful people were always in meetings. Preston ignored her from parties. Nathaniel would ignore her from boardrooms. That was how life worked. Then Olivia spoke again. "The meeting ended 3 minutes ago." Caroline opened her eyes. "What?" The moment he received the hospital alert, he stopped the presentation. Her breathing slowed. "Why?" Another pause followed. "Mrs. Whitaker, I am only repeating what happened." Caroline waited. Olivia continued. He asked one question. The words immediately reminded her of the anonymous messages. Everything tonight seemed connected to questions. "What did he ask?" Olivia answered softly. "He asked whether you and the baby were safe." Silence filled the space between them. Caroline stared through the rain-covered glass at the city lights beyond the hospital parking lot. Not where she lived. Not whether she was married. Not why the hospital called. Whether she and the baby were safe. Tears unexpectedly filled her eyes. She quickly wiped them away. And what happened after that? Olivia exhaled. Mr. Brooks canceled the rest of his schedule. Caroline felt her heartbeat accelerate again. Why? The answer came immediately. Because he is already on his way to Seattle. Caroline lowered the phone slowly after the call ended. Nathaniel Brooks was coming to Seattle. The sentence repeated itself in her mind like a distant echo. 9 years ago, hearing those words would have changed everything. Tonight, she did not know what they meant. She only knew that while her husband ignored her calls, a man from her past had canceled an entire schedule after hearing she was in trouble. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Her phone lit up again. Preston. For a moment, she considered letting it ring. Then she answered. "What now?" she asked quietly. The irritation in his voice arrived immediately. "Where are you?" Caroline almost laughed. "The hospital. The same hospital I have been in all night." Silence followed. "You do not need that attitude." Caroline looked toward the elevators leading to the maternity floor. "I called you 19 times. I was working. You were celebrating." Another silence. Then Preston sighed. "Can we discuss this tomorrow?" Tomorrow again. Always tomorrow. Caroline ended the call before he could continue. For the first time in years, she did not feel guilty for doing it. Minutes later, a nurse approached carrying updated paperwork. "Mrs. Whitaker?" Caroline stood carefully. "Yes." The nurse smiled. "The hospital administration asked me to inform you that your account is currently under review." Caroline frowned. "What does that mean?" "Someone contacted our executive billing department regarding your case." Her heartbeat immediately accelerated. "Who?" The nurse glanced at the file. "I am not authorized to share that information yet." Yet. The word carried its own mystery. Caroline sat back down and watched rain slide across the massive lobby windows. The hospital felt different now. The fear was still there. The uncertainty remained. But for the first time all night, she was no longer facing it alone. Across the country, someone had heard her name and started moving. 30 minutes later, activity suddenly increased near the front entrance. Security personnel exchanged brief conversations through earpieces. Administrators appeared from offices. Several employees hurried toward the lobby. Caroline noticed the change immediately. Something was happening. Then the automatic glass doors opened. Cold night air drifted into the building. A tall man stepped through the entrance. For a moment, Caroline forgot how to breathe. Nathaniel looked different from the young entrepreneur she remembered. Older, stronger, more confident. Success had sharpened him without hardening him. His navy overcoat fit perfectly over an expensive tailored suit. Behind him walked 2 executives and a legal advisor carrying documents. Yet none of that was what captured Caroline's attention. It was his eyes. Because the moment he entered the lobby, they found her instantly. Not the billing desk. Not the administrators. Not the doctors. Her. The noise of the hospital seemed to disappear. Years vanished. Memories returned. Nathaniel took several steps forward before stopping. His expression softened in a way she had not seen in a very long time. Then his gaze lowered briefly toward her pregnancy, before returning to her face. Concern appeared immediately. Real concern. Not curiosity. Not judgment. Concern. Caroline felt emotion rising unexpectedly inside her. Nathaniel spoke first. His voice remained calm, steady, familiar. "Are you okay?" 3 simple words. Yet they carried more sincerity than every conversation she had experienced that day. Caroline nodded slowly. The doctors say the baby is stable. Relief flashed across his face. Brief but unmistakable. He exhaled and nodded once. Good. Then he turned toward the billing department. Show me everything. Within seconds, administrators appeared beside him. Files opened. Screens changed. Conversations began. Nathaniel reviewed documents with quiet focus. He asked precise questions. He signed forms. He approved authorizations. Nobody argued. Nobody delayed. Finally, one of the administrators turned the monitor toward Caroline. A new message had appeared across the account screen. Paid in full, Brooks Family Trust. Caroline stared at the words in disbelief. Then another notification appeared beneath it. Immediate transfer approved. Presidential maternity suite authorized. And standing beside her, Nathaniel quietly said the one thing she never expected to hear again. You should never have had to go through this alone. Caroline barely slept after being moved into the presidential maternity suite. The room overlooked the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was quiet, comfortable, secure. Yet her mind refused to rest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the words that had appeared on the hospital screen. Paid in full. She saw Nathaniel standing in the lobby. She heard his voice asking if she and the baby were safe. Most of all, she kept thinking about the contrast. One man had promised to be there and disappeared. Another had disappeared years ago and somehow showed up exactly when she needed him. Shortly after sunrise, a doctor entered her room with updated test results. Everything looks stable this morning, he said with a reassuring smile. Relief washed over Caroline. Thank you. The doctor nodded. You should focus on reducing stress. Easier said than done. The moment he left, her phone vibrated. Preston. 7 missed calls had accumulated overnight. 3 voice messages. 11 text messages. Caroline opened the most recent one. We need to talk immediately. Not how are you? Not how is the baby? We need to talk immediately. She locked the screen. A few minutes later, another message arrived. This one contained only 5 words. Why is Nathaniel involved? Caroline stared at the screen. There it was. The question she had been expecting. Not concern. Not responsibility. Nathaniel. She did not answer. Downstairs, hospital administrators were already discussing Nathaniel's payment authorization. News traveled quickly among wealthy circles. By noon, Preston finally arrived. Caroline saw him through the glass wall before he entered the suite. Expensive suit. Perfect haircut. Carefully controlled expression. To anyone else, he still looked like a successful businessman. To Caroline, he looked like a stranger. The door opened. Caroline. She looked up from her chair, but said nothing. Preston stepped inside. I came as soon as I could. The statement was so disconnected from reality that she almost smiled. You came 16 hours later. His jaw tightened. I had important obligations. I know. Preston looked around the luxurious suite. Then his eyes landed on a folder resting on the side table. The billing authorization folder. Caroline noticed the exact moment he saw the name. Brooks Family Trust. His expression changed instantly. So it is true. Caroline folded her arms. What is true? Nathaniel paid for this. Not thank goodness you received care. Not I am glad you are safe. Nathaniel paid for this. Caroline felt something inside her finally settle. The uncertainty was gone. She understood now. Preston was not worried about what happened. He was worried about who fixed it. The hospital needed payment, she said calmly. You were unavailable. Preston took a step closer. Why did you call him? Caroline stared at him in disbelief. I did not. Then how did he know? That is what you want to talk about. His silence answered the question. At that exact moment, the suite door opened again. Nathaniel stepped inside, carrying a coffee cup and a folder of legal documents from the hospital administration. He stopped immediately when he saw Preston. The room became very quiet. Neither man spoke at first. Preston broke the silence. You move fast. Nathaniel's expression remained calm. The hospital called, and you came running. Nathaniel looked toward Caroline before answering. Someone needed help. The simplicity of the response hit harder than any insult. Preston looked away. Nathaniel placed the documents on the table. Then he turned to leave, clearly unwilling to create a scene. Before he reached the door, Caroline's phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message. Her pulse quickened instantly. She opened it. Attached was a screenshot from the previous afternoon. A bank transfer authorization form. The signature at the bottom belonged to Preston. The destination account belonged to Sloan Mercer. And the amount matched almost every missing dollar from their joint account. The screenshot seemed to drain every sound from the room. Caroline stared at the transfer authorization while her heartbeat pounded in her ears. The numbers matched. The date matched. The amount matched the money that had disappeared from their joint account hours before she was admitted to the hospital. At the bottom sat Preston's digital signature. Beside it was the destination account. Sloan Mercer. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Preston stepped forward. That is not what it looks like. Caroline slowly lowered the phone. Really? The question came out calmer than she expected. Perhaps because the shock had already passed. What remained was clarity. Nathaniel watched quietly from near the door. He did not interrupt. He did not defend her. He simply remained present. Preston rubbed a hand across his face. The transfer was temporary. Caroline laughed softly. Temporary. It was part of a restructuring strategy. A restructuring strategy that emptied our account while I was sitting in a hospital? Preston opened his mouth, but no answer came. The silence spoke louder than any explanation. Her phone vibrated again. Another anonymous message. Caroline hesitated before opening it. This time the attachment was older. Much older. 9 years old. Her breath caught immediately. The file contained an email chain. At the top was a name she had not expected to see. Nathaniel Brooks. She looked up instinctively. Nathaniel's expression changed the moment he saw the subject line. He recognized it. What is it? Preston asked. Caroline ignored him and opened the document. The first message came from Nathaniel during the collapse of his first company. She remembered that period vividly. Investors had disappeared. Headlines had turned negative. Calls stopped being returned. Then Nathaniel vanished from her life. At least that was the story she believed. Caroline began reading. The message was addressed to her. Every word felt like a punch to the chest. Nathaniel explained the financial crisis. He apologized for the uncertainty. He promised he was working day and night to save the company and protect his employees. Then she reached the final paragraph. Tears immediately filled her eyes. If I can fix this, I am coming back for you. I am not giving up on us. Caroline stopped breathing for a second. She had never seen that email before. Not once. Not ever. Her hands trembled as she scrolled downward. Another attachment appeared. A delivery report. Message intercepted. Forwarded. Her eyes widened. Forwarded to Preston Whitaker. The room suddenly felt smaller. Caroline slowly looked up. Preston had gone completely pale. You received this? She asked. He said nothing. Preston. Her voice sharpened. You received this? Finally, he nodded once. The truth landed with devastating simplicity. 9 years ago, when she believed Nathaniel abandoned her, Nathaniel had actually tried to reach her. The message never arrived because someone else received it first. Someone else decided what she would and would not know. Nathaniel looked away toward the window. The pain in his expression revealed that he was learning part of this truth for the first time as well. Caroline felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Not because of the past. Because of how much of her life had been built on a lie. Preston swallowed hard. I thought I was protecting you. Caroline stared at him in disbelief. Protecting me from what? He struggled to answer. From uncertainty. No, her voice remained calm. You protected yourself. The words hung in the air. Nobody argued because nobody could. Her phone vibrated one final time. Another message from the anonymous sender. Just one sentence. Caroline opened it slowly. The sender had one more secret. And this secret would destroy the perfect image Preston had spent years building. Caroline stared at the final anonymous message while the room remained silent around her. The sender had one more secret. And this secret would destroy the perfect image Preston had spent years building. Her thumb hovered above the attachment. For a brief moment, she considered deleting it. She already knew enough to question everything. The missing money. The intercepted email. The years of deception. How much worse could the truth possibly be? Then she opened the file. A series of documents appeared on the screen. Legal drafts. Internal memos. Financial projections. At first they seemed unrelated. Then she noticed the dates. Every document had been created within the last 6 months. Her pulse quickened. One title immediately stood out. Post-birth asset transition strategy. Caroline frowned and opened it. The first page looked like standard legal language. The second page felt different. By the third page, her hands were shaking. The document outlined a plan to separate specific marital assets shortly after the birth of her child. Not because of financial necessity, not because of business risk, because it had already been scheduled. Caroline slowly looked up from the screen. Did you know about this? Preston's face lost color the moment he saw the title. Where did you get that? It was not an answer. Caroline felt something inside her harden. Did you know about it? Preston hesitated. The hesitation told her everything. Nathaniel remained near the window, saying nothing. His silence somehow made the moment feel even heavier. Caroline continued reading. Several sections referenced consultations involving Sloan Mercer. Not administrative support. Not executive scheduling. Strategic planning. Private meetings. Long-term transition recommendations. Caroline suddenly understood why so much money had been transferred. Why certain conversations had happened behind closed doors. Why Sloan always seemed unusually involved in decisions that should have belonged to a husband and wife. You were planning this before the baby was even born, Caroline whispered. Preston ran a hand through his hair. It is not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He opened his mouth and closed it again. Across the room, Nathaniel finally spoke. Sometimes the truth becomes obvious because there are no explanations left. Preston shot him a glare, but did not argue. Because he could not. Before anyone could continue, a notification appeared on Preston's phone. Then another. Then 3 more. His expression immediately changed. Caroline recognized that look. Panic. Real panic. Preston answered one of the calls. What happened? Silence followed. Then his face turned pale. What do you mean it is public? Caroline exchanged a glance with Nathaniel. Preston listened for several more seconds before ending the call. What happened? Caroline asked. Preston stared at his screen. Someone leaked the hospital story. The room went still. What story? Nathaniel asked calmly. Preston laughed bitterly. The story about a millionaire husband ignoring his pregnant wife while she sat in a hospital billing office. Caroline's heart skipped. Another call arrived. Then another. News alerts began appearing across multiple applications. Social media posts. Local news coverage. Public commentary. Someone had connected the dots. The unanswered calls. The hospital records. The financial delays. The luxury rooftop celebration. Everything. Preston lowered himself into a chair as if the weight of the situation had suddenly doubled. For years he had carefully managed every detail of his public image. Tonight, that image was cracking in real time. Caroline watched the notifications continue appearing. Strangely, she felt no satisfaction. Only clarity. The truth was finally becoming visible. Her phone vibrated once more. The anonymous sender again. This time there was no attachment. Only a single sentence. Caroline read it twice. Then a third time. Her eyes widened. Because according to the message, the person who leaked everything was not a journalist. It was not a hospital employee. It was not Nathaniel. The message contained only 6 chilling words. Sloan Mercer is protecting herself now. Caroline read the message again. Sloan Mercer is protecting herself now. The words lingered in her mind long after the screen dimmed. Suddenly, every strange event from the past 24 hours seemed connected by an invisible thread. The anonymous messages. The leaked documents. The transfer records. The hospital story reaching the media. Someone had been exposing the truth piece by piece. And according to the latest message, that someone might be the very person Preston trusted most. Across the room, Preston remained focused on the flood of incoming calls. Investors, board members, public relations consultants. The people who once celebrated him now demanded explanations. Caroline watched quietly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just understanding. For years, she had mistaken appearances for reality. Tonight, the difference had finally become clear. Another notification appeared on Preston's phone. He opened it immediately. His expression tightened. Sloan resigned. Caroline was not surprised. When, 10 minutes ago, Nathaniel folded his arms. Interesting timing. Preston ignored the comment and continued reading. She also turned over in turn. The room fell silent again. Caroline felt a strange sense of inevitability. Sloan was not protecting Preston. She was protecting herself. The moment consequences appeared, loyalty disappeared. That realization felt strangely familiar. Preston lowered the phone and looked directly at Caroline. You have to believe me. She stared at him. Believe what? I never planned for any of this to happen. Caroline glanced toward the legal documents resting on the table. The hidden transfers. The post-birth asset strategy. The intercepted email from 9 years ago. None of those things happened by accident. Preston took a slow breath. I made mistakes. Nathaniel remained silent. Caroline appreciated that. He never rushed to answer for her. He never tried to influence her decisions. He simply stood nearby whenever she needed support. The difference between the two men had never felt more obvious. Preston stepped closer. Caroline, I know what this looks like. For once, she replied softly. I think I finally know what it looks like too. The words seemed to hit him harder than anything else she had said. For several moments nobody spoke. Outside the suite windows, rain had finally stopped. The Seattle skyline glowed beneath the evening lights. The city looked calm. Her life did not. Yet for the first time in years, she felt something close to certainty. Her gaze drifted toward the nightstand beside her bed. Resting there was her wedding ring. She had removed it earlier during a medical examination and never put it back on. The small piece of gold suddenly seemed heavier than it ever had before. Caroline reached for it slowly. Preston's eyes followed the movement. Hope flickered briefly across his face. Then she placed the ring on the table between them. Neither man spoke. The gesture said everything. Preston looked down at it as though seeing it for the first time. Caroline. His voice cracked slightly. She shook her head. When I was sitting downstairs in that billing office, I called you 19 times. Silence. I was scared. More silence. I was worried about our son. Preston lowered his eyes. I know. No, Caroline replied. You know now? But you did not know then. Because you never asked. Tears filled his eyes, but Caroline no longer felt responsible for fixing them. That chapter of her life was ending. Nathaniel quietly moved toward the door. He understood this moment belonged to her. Before leaving, he paused. Whatever decision you make, he said gently, make it because it is right for you. Then he stepped into the hallway. Caroline watched the door close behind him. Preston remained standing across from her. The ring still rested on the table between them. A symbol of promises made long ago. Promises forgotten when they mattered most. Caroline looked at it one final time before speaking. Her voice was calm. Steady. Free. I begged for help once, she said. I will never beg for love again. 3 weeks later, the storm that had consumed Caroline's life finally began to fade. The hospital room that once felt like a battlefield of uncertainty had been replaced by something quieter, something stronger. On a clear morning overlooking Elliott Bay, Caroline welcomed her son into the world surrounded by doctors, nurses, and people who genuinely cared whether she was safe. The moment she heard his first cry, every headline, every betrayal, every sleepless night seemed to disappear. Nothing else mattered. She held him against her chest and felt a peace she had not experienced in years. Nathaniel arrived later that afternoon carrying a small blue stuffed elephant and an awkward smile. He stopped near the doorway, careful not to intrude. Caroline noticed how he looked at the baby, not with ownership, not with expectation, simply with kindness. He is perfect, Nathaniel said quietly. Caroline smiled. I think so too. For the first time since reconnecting, neither of them spoke about the past. They did not discuss Preston. They did not discuss lost years. They simply sat together watching a newborn sleep. Sometimes healing arrived not through grand speeches, but through silence. In the months that followed, Preston's world continued changing. The investigations into his financial decisions forced him to step away from several leadership roles. Public attention gradually moved on, but the consequences remained. Caroline never celebrated his downfall. She simply stopped carrying responsibility for his choices. Through legal agreements, Preston remained part of his son's life, but the control he once held over Caroline's future was gone forever. The anonymous messages eventually stopped. Their sender was never officially confirmed. Rumors pointed toward Sloan. Others suggested someone inside Preston's company. In the end, Caroline no longer cared. The truth had found its way into the light, and that was enough. Nearly 1 year later, a crowd gathered inside a newly opened community center in Seattle. Cameras flashed. Reporters took notes. Families filled rows of seats. A banner stretched across the stage. The Bennett Family Maternal Support Foundation. The organization provided emergency financial assistance to mothers facing medical crises. The idea had started with a simple conversation between Caroline and Nathaniel months earlier. Neither of them could forget that terrifying night at the hospital. Neither wanted another woman to sit alone at a billing desk wondering whether she and her child would receive care. Caroline stepped onto the stage holding prepared remarks. She looked confident now, strong. The fear that once lived behind her eyes had been replaced by certainty. In the front row sat dozens of families helped by the foundation. Near the back stood Nathaniel, exactly where he wanted to be, far from the spotlight. Caroline began speaking. She talked about dignity, about compassion, about how quickly a person's life could change when support disappeared. Then she paused. Her gaze drifted toward Nathaniel. Sometimes, she said softly, the people who save us are not the people who promise they always will. Sometimes they are the people who quietly show up when nobody else does. The audience applauded. Nathaniel lowered his head slightly, clearly uncomfortable with attention. Caroline smiled. Some things never changed. Later that evening, after the event ended, they stood outside overlooking the water. Her son slept peacefully in a stroller nearby. The city lights reflected across the harbor. Nathaniel looked toward the skyline. You built something incredible. Caroline shook her head. We built it. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she reached for his hand. Not because she needed rescuing. Not because she was broken. But because she finally had the freedom to choose. Nathaniel smiled. The future remained unwritten. Yet for the first time, that uncertainty felt beautiful. Across town, Preston watched a news segment covering the foundation's success. The camera showed Caroline laughing beside her son beneath the evening lights. He sat quietly after the report ended. No anger. No excuses. Only understanding. Some debts could be repaid with money. Others could not. And as the Seattle skyline shimmered beneath the night sky, one truth remained impossible to ignore. The hospital bill had been paid in a single evening. But the value of a woman's dignity was something no millionaire could ever afford to lose.